An ode to Solana Rowe. It's SZA. Welcome to Six Notes of Separation. If you're new to the podcast, here's how it's going to work. Every episode, I dive into an artist, exploring their lives, their music, their career, everything from birth to present day, and in between any hiccups or scandals they might have got themselves wrapped up in. But to keep things really interesting, if you will, and to keep you all on your toes, I've put my own little spin on things. Of course I have. Each episode has to be linked to the previous and succeeding artist in some way. This could be through a producer in common. This could be through a label two artists are under. This could be through an online feud, a relationship history. Truly anything goes, as long as there's a link. So, without further ado, I'm going to be exploring the life of an artist who's broken records set by Taylor Swift and Whitney Houston. An artist who nearly ended up making a rock band with Lizzo, but has equally been responsible for reshaping what it means to be an R&B act in the present day. Though she doesn't want it, and though she desires a bucolic life, I'm going to be looking into the success and fame of SZA. But before we dive into all things SZA, it's time to reveal the link between this episode and last episode's Chappell Roan. The connection between these two artists is very, very simple. It's purely just admiration for each other. During Chappell's rise to worldwide fame last summer, SZA started to comment her adulation and respect for Chappell under several Instagram posts where the singer was performing what became iconic and record-breaking performances at music festivals such as Lollapalooza and Governor's Ball. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's all there for you to check out last episode. SZA even reposted a video of Chappell's Lollapalooza set saying, "She makes me want to keep making new music and art forever." And guys, the peace and love was very much reciprocated. In March this year, Chappell was asked who her dream collaborator was when being interviewed on the acclaimed Call Her Daddy podcast. Chappell, without hesitation, named SZA as her dream musical partner, leading to another repost from SZA where it's clear she was somewhat starstruck. SZA's response went a little bit like this. "I actually didn't believe this quote when I saw it written till I saw it come out her mouth just now. 'Cause dead ass, same. Can't really say it without an American accent, sorry guys." She continued with, "Please, we must." And actually, despite having common ground by being two genre-bending and genre-shaping artists, after I researched further into the life of SZA, I found that these two artists would probably make a cracking pair of friends too. Not only do they share similar attitudes to fame and the soul-bearing nature that the music industry can be, but they were also born in the very same state. So it's Missouri, 1989, and Solana Rowe was born. Like Kaylee Rose, better known as Chappell Roan, Solana was born into a conservative and religious household, not uncommon for Missouri residents. Her mother was an executive at a telecommunications company and her father an executive at CNN. So it's safe to say that creativity and artistry didn't really run in the family. But this didn't mean that music wasn't prevalent in the Rowe household. With her mother following Christianity and her father Islam, Solana grew up surrounded by church music and instrumental pieces. Her father introduced her to jazz and funk, whilst her sister introduced her to hip-hop and rap. But what got her into contemporary music, you may ask? Well, it would only be dancing with one of the best ballet companies in the world, the American Ballet Theatre. This completely blew my mind. I have a background in dance loosely. Before radio and podcasting, it was dancing. And the ABT, the American Ballet Theatre, is renowned for being one of the best, as I just said, one of the best companies in the world. So I don't know how it works. I don't know if you can just take classes there as a normal human being, as a member of the general public, or if you have to, I presume you have to audition to take classes. But for SZA to be dancing with the ABT in the ABT means she must have been a bloody good ballet dancer, if you ask me. But we're not here to talk about dance. No. Back to SZA's youth. Although both parents immersed themselves in each other's religions and cultures, SZA followed in her father's footsteps, identifying with Islam, which is actually where the meaning behind her stage name comes from, but we're going to touch on that in a little bit. However, yes, there's a however, growing up as Muslim in school wasn't an easy feat. SZA was bullied pretty severely for wearing a hijab, and after the tragic events of 9/11, she put an end to wearing one at all out of fear of increased Islamophobia. In an interview with Vogue last year, SZA recalled that no longer wearing a hijab caused a lot of weird energy with her dad, saying that she started feeling so much shame from the bullying she was already subject to, that to cope with it all, she just tried to dissociate from herself. I mean, it's really sad coping mechanism, and it's sad that it happened from such a young... I mean, it's sad that it happened at all, but the fact that her coping mechanism was to dissociate and not really even feel present in her own body is just... it's even worse. She also went on to describe her childhood as being very lonely and as quote unquote being the kid no one wanted to hang out with. And something I want to talk about is I think it's really interesting how many artists have this background of being the odd kid, being the weird one, being the lonely kid, because it's so funny how they all blow up and become these massive pop stars and big successes and popular. Like they blow up and they are popular. Like everyone wants to be them, everyone wants to meet them. You can't deny that. And I think it's really interesting that they have a background that's normally defined by loneliness and sadness. Doechii was very, very similar. Like the racism and abuse she suffered from such a young age is, it was harrowing to read about and it was harrowing to write about. Sometimes I guess it feels a little disheartening seeing how many musicians, and I guess forget the fact that musicians, like how many people's lives are defined by bullying, but I guess the silver lining of it is that they do blow up to become these huge successes and they do blow up to make incredible art. But perhaps it's this exclusion and feeling of being an outsider that not only makes SZA feel connected to a similarly disillusioned Chappell Roan, but it's also what so many see and connect to in her own music too. As a result of how she felt in school, SZA has said it's a goal of hers to make her music as inclusive as possible. She said, "I witnessed what exclusion gets everybody and the whole thing about being cool. It hurt my feelings as a kid, and as a grown-ass woman, I still hate that." Literally preach. So we can maybe start to see why SZA grew the cult following she cultivated from such an early stage of her career. She gets what it's like to be unwanted and to be alone. And I think that really resonates with people. I think it's a feeling loads of people forget, whether they've been bullied or not. I think loneliness is something everyone experiences in their life. So I think the fact that she communicates that through her music and uses her music as a coping mechanism, as I said, it resonates, it grabs people. But I'm now jumping ahead to the life of SZA, so let's go back to where we were. Let's go back to the life of Solana Rowe. So Solana had a tough time growing up. She graduated from high school in 2008 and jumped between 3 different unis before settling at Delaware State University to study marine biology. Perhaps a little nod to the inspiration behind SOS, the kind of sea marine vibes. Things did start to go south though, when SZA dropped out of her studies in her final year to focus on music, as pretty much most musicians do. Her lifestyle around this time wasn't great either. Smoking, drinking, and house hopping became the dominating forces in her life. Additionally, she would lie about her age to earn some money by bartending and occasionally dancing in strip clubs in New Jersey and New York. Now, as a very small side plot to throw in here, I'd be doing you all a disservice if I didn't mention that SZA ended a relationship with Drake. Yes, the Drake, in what would have been her first or second year of uni in 2009. Of course, at this time, both musicians were what she describes as babies. Their relationship was one of young love and childish romance. Neither musician had blown up at this point. They were both in, I guess they connected because they were both in similar positions of hustling, getting through the world, like living life and trying to make music and trying to be successful. And my God, have they both been, I don't even have the words, I'm speechless, but my God, have they been unbelievably successful. Despite her close ties with Kendrick Lamar now, the rapper who could be credited with ending Drake's reputation, there doesn't seem to be any bad blood from SZA in regards to Drake's person. Their relationship was sort of dropped out of the blue in Drake's 2020 song Mr. Right Now, but there isn't really much more to add to the story. As SZA said, it was purely just young love. So moving on to 2012, where the time comes for Solana to become SZA. If the name sounds familiar, you might be thinking about the members of the archetypal 90s hip-hop band, the Wu-Tang Clan. Members RZA and SZA both paid homage to Islam with their abbreviated name, and SZA followed right in their footsteps. A cheeky history lesson for the both of us now. The acronym comes from the supreme alphabet used by the Black nationalist movement 5% Nation, who were influenced by Islam. The S in SZA's name stands for sovereign or saviour. The The Z, or Z if you will, for zigzag stands for knowledge, and the A for Allah. And that, I think, I think that holds so much poignancy. The fact that SZA maintained her connection to Islam in such a tangible way after the Islamophobia she faced in her youth for obviously wearing hijab, it's powerful. It's really, really powerful. And I know it's cliche to say, but I think there's a lot in there in terms of SZA overcoming the shame and guilt she felt as a child. It's quite remarkable, and it's quite touching actually that she chose to honour her religion in a way that's will forever and infinitely and quite literally be tied to her name. But anyway, if you're wondering how SZA took her talent and turned it into a profession, my friends, the answer is TDE. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the answer is Top Dog Entertainment. One of the most successful record labels, I would say, to this present day. Now, SZA first came into contact with TDE in 2011 through her boyfriend at the time. This boyfriend ended up being her fiancé for 5 years, and is also someone who she said she became heavily codependent on in all aspects of her life. You know, this relationship was huge for her. It spanned 11 years of survival and acted as the muse behind many of the breakup songs people so dearly love on SOS. But the key info to take away from this story is that this boyfriend was a fashion designer who was sponsoring a show of Kendrick Lamar's in 2011. For anyone who isn't aware, Top Dog Entertainment became so famous and so successful because it's the label that represented Kendrick from the start of his career until 2022. They also signed people like Schoolboy Q, people like Isaiah Rashad, sorry if I'm pronouncing any names wrong, so many successful people. They've recently just signed Doechii, who's become the first female rapper signed to the label. They're huge. They're really, really huge. SZA getting in contact with TDE is a big, big deal. The story is a little hazy, but from what I've gathered, SZA and her boyfriend were dropping off these clothes to Kendrick when the TDE president, Terrace Henderson, aka Punch, noticed this boyfriend completely lost in his world, completely lost in what he was listening to. Punch asked him what he was listening to, and the response was one word that ended up changing SZA's life forever. Not to be dramatic. The boyfriend pointed at SZA and said, her. Quite simply, her. Punch asked to listen to the music and clearly saw something in the demos SZA had made. For just 2 years later, in 2013, SZA became the first female artist to be signed to TDE. In that 2-year period, SZA really showed what she was capable of by self-releasing 2 EPs. The first was called See SZA Run, which critics immediately picked up on and compared to the likes of Drake and The Weeknd. And the second EP was called S, which saw her gain the beginnings of a fan base. After signing to TDE, her profile was massively increased, with 50 Cent even hopping on a remix of her single Teen Spirit. What was interesting about the release of this song, though, was that it was originally put on SoundCloud, with SZA tagging it in a category saying not R&B, but labelling it as Glitter Trap instead. This shying away from an R&B label is something that SZA has spoken out about a lot. She says that she identifies her music as alternative as opposed to R&B. And the only reason her music's put in R&B categories at all, and in the first place, is purely because she's black. And this is an issue that's really prevalent in the industry. So much music by black artists is mislabeled as R&B or urban purely because of the colour of their skin. And this is something that Tyler, the creator, has also commented on. And he actually, I think he kind of researched a conversation a couple years ago when I believe one of his albums won an award, or one of his songs won an award in an urban category, and he took to the Grammy stage to do a speech saying that his music was not urban and his music did not belong in that category, and the only reason he was put in that category was simply because of how he looked. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure that's the gist of the speech, but obviously go home, do your research. Similarly, Miles Smith, who's a UK indie solo artist, pop artist, has also spoken about a similar thing happening to him. Same with Rachel Chinariri, who's famously just opened for Sabrina Carpenter on the Short and Sweet tour. Their music is pop. Their music is indie pop. And they've always been mislabeled and put in R&B and urban categories, again, because of their colour of their skin. And what SZA has said is that the whole R&B categorization is simply just a byproduct of the racial segregation between white and black music that took place in the 20th century. And I think she's damn right. If you listen to her music, she doesn't stick to one genre at all. Some songs hit a pop rock vibe, some are more hip hop, some lo-fi, some soul. she has such eclecticism in that, as does Tyler, the creator. His music is so eclectic. The only reason they're boxed into R&B or into urban categories is because of the inherent prejudice ingrained in the industry. It's because of this segregation that exists, and for what reason I really don't know. Anyway, tangent over. I wish I could change the industry so that, you know, it would be easy for black artists to break through, but I am not responsible for that. The following year, 2014, SZA featured on many songs by fellow TDE signees, as well as putting out her third EP, Z, or Z again. You know, got to represent the English culture here, which not only marked her first entry on the Billboard charts, but featured productions by the late and great Mac Miller. Insane. How I never would have known that Mac Miller produced songs for SZA. The New Attention saw her open for acclaimed artists on tour, such as Coldplay and Jhené Aiko, and it was also in this year when her songwriting skills were picked up by fellow artists and labels, writing songs for Nicki Minaj and Beyonce. So the evidence is pretty stark here in terms of how many opportunities TDE gave her for breaking through into the industry. But the relationship between Top Dawg and SZA wasn't one of ease by any means. Just a year later, in 2015, everything seemed to go a little bit backwards. SZA had begun working on what started off as her last EP, A, but ended up becoming her debut album, Control, when the politics of the industry started to wear her down. The EP, originally scheduled to be released that year in 2015, bear this date in mind, 2015, was postponed for an initial 12 months due to disputes with her label, as well as the constant tampering of songs that went on as a result of SZA's own artistic perfectionism. To really put it in perspective to you, she had to whittle down a list of 150 to 200 songs into an album track list. Not an easy game, not an easy task, that one. Not long after that, TDE hit SZA with another postponement, causing SZA to take to Twitter to vent about how the label was putting her on the edge of quitting music. Tensions further boiled when SZA's song Luann Johnson, the centerpiece of A, that also had a music video ready to be released for it, was handed over to Rihanna instead. What was Luann Johnson became Consideration, the opening track to Rihanna's 2016 album Anti. Although angered and despondent at the time, SZA has later come out saying that she's grateful for the label's decision and has come to understand it, because ultimately collabing on a song with Rihanna massively upped her profile. But another factor that made this time particularly tough for SZA was the severe depression and suicidality that came over her after 3 of her ex-boyfriends died in close succession. I mean, having to deal with one death, let alone 3, is a lot to process. But having to deal with that grief on top of being worn down by the industry, I mean, it's no wonder that she was on the verge of dropping out of music indefinitely. But it's a very good thing that SZA pushed through. And it's a very good thing that SZA persevered, despite everything seemingly crashing down. Because in 2017, after signing a joint record deal with Top Dawg and Sony's RCA Records, SZA's debut album Control was finally released to high praise and critical acclaim. The album debuted at number 3 on the US Billboard 200, and it broke the record for being the second longest charting R&B album made by a woman. It also received 5 Grammy nominations, propelling SZA into the highly anticipated Best New Artist category. And this is crazy, guys. Get ready for this stat. As of 2024, Control became the longest charting female album in Billboard 200 history. Again, Control became the longest charting female album in Billboard 200 history. She stayed in the 200 for more than 7 years. 7 years. That surpassed Taylor Swift. She broke Taylor Swift's record previously held with her album 1989. That album is beloved by so many, not just fans, but I think by the public. Like, it was a really popular album. And I think it's insane and crazy that SZA has achieved this record and has achieved this level of success. And whilst Taylor has an air of world domination about her, people still don't know SZA's name. And if that's not a symbol or a macrocosm of how othered R&B music is, I don't know what is. It's genuinely so bizarre that on paper, SZA has broken records previously held by Taylor Swift. But when it comes to public discourse, when it comes to knowledge of the general population, everyone knows Taylor and everyone will know a song by Taylor. But the same can't be said for SZA. What followed from this overwhelming success was the announcement of SZA's first headline tour that continued through to 2018, as well as a string of collaborations with established artists such as Kendrick Lamar, Maroon 5 and Cardi B. In 2019, SZA hit her first scandal, but to be honest, this isn't even a scandal for SZA. This is a scandal for Sephora, the shop, the beauty store. After being racially profiled for stealing a Fenty beauty product, SZA, of course, took to Twitter to call out the store for bag searching her. Sephora responded by shutting down all of its stores across the US so it could provide a diversity training day for its staff members. Isn't that wild? Like, SZA had the power. I mean, obviously it's such a pressing issue she's talking about. Absolutely no qualms about that. But the fact that all it took for Sephora to shut down all of its US stores and give staff a diversity training day was one celebrity speaking out about its issues. I mean, there's really nothing else to say on this apart from that. But yeah, I mean, it obviously brings to light the very prevalent and vivid issue that racism is. Moving on to 2020, and SZA's life sort of hits the fan again. Although having another wave of viral success after putting out her collab Kiss Me More with Doja Cat, you know, another song that absolutely soundtracks our lockdowns, SZA's tensions with Top Dawg returned, as did another mental health crisis. Just like the release of Control, SZA's second album, teased to drop in 2019 originally, again, keep that in mind, was postponed by Punch for reasons that did not seem to be explained. She said in a tweet that all Punch ever told her was that she'd be able to release her album soon. New singles from SZA did follow quickly, however, with viral hits such as Good Days, I Hate You, and a deluxe version of Control, pleasing many, many fans. But all the contentment that people believe goes hand in hand with fame was a quality that appeared to be lost on SZA. After more deaths, that of friend and collaborator Mac Miller, who was so beloved in the industry and by the public and by family and friends, by everyone who's ever spoken about his death says it's such a huge loss. I don't know much about him, to be honest, or his music, but I do know just from the grief that came after his death how influential and how much of an impact he had on people's lives. But anyway, after his death in 2018, alongside the death of her aunt and then her grandmother in 2020, SZA opened up to Rolling Stone that she'd hit a new all-time low. She said, "I've buried so many people in my life, you would think that I'd be used to it or just have a threshold. But my grandma broke the threshold for me. It was so weird to not have any control over anything." The return of the depression and suicidality she experienced in 2016, in tandem with the confinement of lockdown and the frustration with her label, meant SZA was ready to quit music all over again. In an interview with Community Voices in 2022, SZA said the pressure of making and releasing another album was just exhausting, that having to deal with all the outside opinions and outside pressures took the catharsis that music gave her away. She even went as far as to say that the music business was a psychosis-inducing industry, opening up about her intense anxiety and fear of perception. This anxiety is really what controls SZA, in my personal opinion. I think it's clear that for SZA, the toughest aspect of her job is this overbearing anxiety she's riddled with. Not only does she fall into a pit of self-loathing by agreeing with hateful comments made online about her, but she also battles with feelings of dissociation and dehumanization due to the industry viewing her as a product. Again, this fear and anxiety she has about perception, what doesn't help, so she has this initial anxiety about being perceived and about people watching her, but on top of that, that perception is what makes her feel dissociated and what makes her feel dehumanized, because she's like, I don't even feel like a person right now. You know, to a label, all an artist is money. All they are is profit. And it's the same for venues and for media companies, even for fans and consumers. Like, people don't see her as Solana Rowe, who suffers from anxiety. They see her as the money-making machine or relatable poet who goes by SZA. Ultimately, the musician has found methods of balancing her job with her mental health, turning to meditation, exercise, therapy, nature, and, of course, music, as a means of staying quite honestly sane. But I just think it's such a shame that she has to sacrifice her happiness and her well-being to continue with being a successful artist. Anyway, to bring you up to speed with where SZA is now, she released her smash hit sophomore album SOS at the end of 2022. the record spending 7 weeks atop the Billboard 200 chart. The first, another fantastic stat for you, okay? The first R&B album to do so since 1987. The previous holder of this record was Whitney Houston. So, to recap, she's broken Taylor Swift's record. She's broken Whitney Houston's record. Yet people still, to this day, haven't heard of SZA. Yeah. The single from the album, Kill Bill, landed her first number one on the Billboard Hot 100, leading to a string of songs off the album blowing up on TikTok. She then embarked on a critically acclaimed tour from 2023 until 2024, scored another number one hit from her collab with Drake, headlined Glastonbury despite a hefty amount of unfavourable reviews, again because people didn't know who she was, which is remarkable and insane and stupid. She also performed at the Super Bowl with Kendrick Lamar, swept up another Grammy for Best R&B Song, kicked off the Grand National Tour, a co-headlining tour with the famous Lamar, and even made her highly successful acting debut alongside Keke Palmer in the movie One of Them Days. So although SZA has been open about the perseverance it takes to continue with being perceived on such an intense level, from the way her career is going, she's doing a pretty phenomenal job at not letting it affect her success. And on top of that, not letting it push her into any scandal or controversy. Whilst her nervous system may be torn to shreds, with her peace of mind being eradicated by anxiety, it's her faith and religion that reminds SZA why she should keep going. Though Solana Rowe once shied away from her faith, bullied into shame and guilt, it's SZA's choice to honour Islam through her name who helped her reclaim her beliefs. And thank God she did. Thank God she did, because without believing God chose this position for her to rise to, it's easy to say that the musical and literary genius that's connected with millions across the globe would have put down her pen before she'd even had the chance to make known the capabilities of her talent. And I guess that really brings me to the end of this episode. Yeah, I hit you with the outro. I did. I can't tell you how long it took me to write that, but I enjoyed every second of it. And that brings me to the end of SZA's life. Thank you all so much for listening and for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, hey, how are you? Hi. If you want to keep up to date with all things 6 Notes of Separation, please make sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at 6 Notes Podcast. And I'll be back very, very shortly with another episode on another artist where we'll be exploring the link between them and SZA.